Skip to content chat history, you said. Can you create tour real-life story outlines for me in a third-person style? I'll only provide the title, and the story should be completed in 2 parts. ChatGPT said yes, absolutely. You can just give me the title. For example, The Cowboy Found a Crying Girl Beside the Desert Road, and I'll create a true real-life story in third-person style. Divided into 2 parts, each one, written in simple English, around 1,300 words, or another word length if you prefer, without headings, interesting and emotional, so the audience never gets bored. Completely clean, with no violent or inappropriate content. Please send your first title, and I'll begin writing part 1 right away. You said, The Apache Beggar Who Became the Cowboy's Wife for $100. She didn't expect to get pregnant. ChatGPT said, Thought for 24's part 1. He first noticed her outside the feed store, sitting on the edge of the old boardwalk with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She did not look weak. She looked proud and very tired. Dust lay on her dress and on the soft leather of her shoes. Her hair was braided and wrapped with a simple cloth. She met people's eyes without fear, then looked away when they hurried past. She did not call out. She did not beg with words. She only sat there calm and still, as if saving the last of her strength. The cowboy's name was Mason Hale. He had come to town for nails, salt, and a new rope. He was tall and plain with a steady way of moving, like a man who measured his steps. He saw many things he rarely spoke about. A nail half bent, a horse with a sore hoof, a cloud that might mean rain by evening. He also saw the way the woman's fingers trembled when she stood to let an older couple pass. He set his parcel on the counter, paid, and stepped outside. Ma'am, he said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. Do you need water? She nodded. Thank you. Her voice was clear. I have not eaten today. He went to the pump, filled a tin cup, and brought it to her. She drank slow, as if water was a matter that asked for patience. When she finished, she wiped the rim with her sleeve and gave the cup back with both hands, careful and polite. My name is Mason, he said. Mason Hale. Ayanna, she said. My people are Apache. I am looking for work. I can sew, clean, gather herbs, care for animals. I will take pay and food. I do not want trouble. Mason did not hear trouble in her words. He heard a list of skills and a small hope. Townspeople had mixed hearts. Some were kind. Some were quick to judge what they did not know. He did not want to leave her sitting there to be judged by anyone with a sharp tongue. He looked at her hands, strong and able. He thought of his ranch. 2 long fences that needed fixing, a milk cow ready to calve, a house that was clean enough but lonely. I have work, he said. It is honest work. Room and board, and pay at the end of each week. I cannot promise much more. She studied him as if weighing his words for truth. I will work hard, she said. They walked to the livery where his mare waited. Mason bought her a simple meal at the cafe window. She ate with quiet grace. Then they set out for the ranch, the road long and unhurried. The air smelled of dust and sun-warmed sage. A hawk circled, patient with the day. Ayanna rode side-saddle with the sure balance of someone who understood the rhythm of a moving animal. She did not chatter. She asked careful questions. Is the well deep? Where does the creek run when it rains? Do you keep chickens? He answered in the same simple way. It is a good well. The creek crosses the east pasture. 10 hens and a rooster that thinks highly of himself. At the ranch, she set down her small bundle by the door and stood still, taking measure of the place. The house was plain, made from timber and care. The porch was swept. The fields were scorched by heat but honest. She smiled at the cow, and the cow flicked her tail like a greeting. They found a rhythm the first week. Ayanna sewed new straps for a saddle and made them neat. She mended shirts with such fine stitches that a man could look twice and still not see where the tear had been. She made bread that rose high and a pot of herb tea that tasted like clean air after rain. Mason repaired fence posts while she sorted the barn tools by size and purpose, labeling them in chalk with steady block letters. There were small talks and quiet silences that were not heavy. One evening after a day of heat, she stood with him on the porch and watched the sun slide down behind the hills. The sky changed by slow steps until it held a deep gold that felt like peace. Ayanna said, I was told there is work north with my aunt. I tried to travel there. She looked at the horizon. But the road was not safe for me alone. Mason understood what she did not say out loud. The world could be unkind to a woman without family nearby. He had seen such things. He did not speak of them. Instead, he asked, What would make the road safe? A lawful promise, she said, quiet. A ring. A paper from the county that says a man and a woman walk together as family. Not to buy a person. To buy safety. To buy time. If such a thing is possible. She looked down. I know it is a strange request. It was not strange to Mason. He was a careful judge of people, and he had watched her work. Watched her honor her word. Watched her meet each day with courage. He knew what the county clerk charged for a license and for filing the paper. He knew how much a ring cost if you did not care about size, only honest metal. The sum was not small, but it was not beyond him. $100 would pay the clerk, the ring, and food for the month while they decided what they wanted their life to be. He also knew a paper did not make kindness. People made that day by day. A promise is not a shield unless we keep it with good hearts, he said. If we do this, it will be with respect. You will have your own room. Your own keys. If you decide later you want to travel north, I will take you myself. She breathed out slowly, relief loosening her shoulders. I would consent to a marriage of kindness, she said. I do not ask for more. They went to town on a clear morning. Mason laid $100 on the clerk's table. The license, the filing fee, a plain gold band, and supplies for their pantry. He did not bargain. He kept the receipt folded in his pocket, not as proof of a purchase, but as a record of a promise made with care. The judge spoke simple words. Mason repeated them in a steady voice. Ayanna did the same, her eyes level and bright. There were no flowers, but there was dignity. They left the small office as husband and wife, with the understanding that trust would be built like a fence, post by post, straight and honest. Back at the ranch, Ayanna set a small bowl of water by the door and washed her hands before entering, a sign of respect for a shared home. Mason noticed and built his habits around it. He knocked before entering her room. He asked before moving her things. She did the same. They learned each other's ways without noise. Days grew into weeks. They planted late beans in the strip of earth behind the house. They fixed the hinge on the back gate. Ayanna taught him the names of herbs in her language, smiling when his tongue tripped and then found the sound. He taught her how to judge the sky for the day's weather and how to read a horse's ear to know its mind. They laughed sometimes, small and simple, not forcing the sound. There were moments of nearness that rose like a warm tide and then fell back, gentle and careful. One evening a storm moved over the hills. The wind pressed against the house and the rain wrote quick lines on the roof. Mason set another log on the fire. Ayanna stood near it with a blanket around her shoulders. He looked at her and saw not a stranger and not a guest, but a partner in the work of being alive. He did not reach for her. He asked, "May I sit near you?" She nodded. They sat with the blanket bridging the space between them, watching the fire burn with steady light. Slow trust became strong trust. The ranch itself seemed to feel it. The cow calved without trouble. The hens laid well. The creek, dry for weeks, began to sing again with thin water. Ayanna placed a single wildflower in a jar on the table. For luck, she said. Mason smiled. Or maybe for thanks. What began with $100 did not feel like a debt. It felt like a seed that had been planted with care and watered with daily work. In the quiet hours, they told each other small stories. A joke a cousin once told. A memory of a winter so cold the kettle sang frost. The stories were threads, and the threads were becoming a cloth. One night, under the soft light of a low lamp, they chose each other fully, not because a paper said so, but because affection had grown into something steady. There was no hurry, no fear, only kindness. In the morning, the house held a new kind of quiet. The sweet quiet that comes when two people have spoken with their whole hearts. Ayanna placed her hand over Mason's and left it there. He did not move, not wanting to startle the peace. We will keep choosing, he said. She nodded. Every day, the sun rose on a home that felt more like itself than it ever had. And yet, as the days moved on, life was ready to bring a surprise neither of them expected. Part 2. Morning came soft and bright, but Ayanna felt tired in a new way. She moved slower when she swept the porch. She needed to sit after hanging 2 shirts on the line. She pressed a hand to her middle and breathed in and out like she was counting. Mason watched without making a fuss. He filled the wood box and carried the water pail. He asked if she wanted tea. She smiled and said yes. She tried to wave away his worry, but worry still stayed in the room like a small shadow. By noon, the breeze turned warm. and the scent of sage came through the window. Ayanna stood at the table and paused again. Her skin looked pale. Mason set down the hammer and came inside. He spoke gently because gentle words help the heart listen. "I think we should ride to town," he said. "We can ask the midwife to see you." Ayanna did not argue. She nodded and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders even though it was not cold. They saddled the mare and rode at an easy pace. The road was quiet. A hawk drew circles in the sky. Dust rose and fell behind them, the way dust always does. The midwife had a tidy room that smelled like soap and dried herbs. She had kind eyes and steady hands. She asked careful questions and listened without interrupting. She pressed her fingers gently on Ayanna's wrist and smiled in a slow, sure way that made the air feel soft. "You are with child," the midwife said. "By the signs, perhaps 3 months along. Your body is doing hard, lovely work. You will need rest, good food, and calm days. I can visit and guide you." Ayanna sat very still. Surprise opened her face. She had not expected this new path. Once, a long time ago, someone had told her it might not happen for her. She had set that sorrow aside and learned other kinds of joy. Now the joy came back to her like water after drought. She did not cry. She placed both hands on her belly and closed her eyes for a moment like a prayer with no words. Mason's throat felt tight. He reached for her hand. She gave it to him, warm and steady. They thanked the midwife and walked out into the bright day. The world looked the same, but it also looked new. Even the fence posts seemed to stand a little taller. On the ride home, they spoke in simple lines. "We will need a cradle," Mason said. "I will weave a blanket," Ayanna said. "I will make a rocker smooth enough for bare feet," he said. "I will brew tea to help my strength," she said. They were not rushing. They were making a small list, the kind that turns into a good life if you check it one line at a time. Back at the ranch, Mason took on the heavy chores without turning them into a story. He lifted the grain sack, he fixed the hinge, he cleaned the ash from the stove. Ayanna cooked lighter meals that were kind to her body. The midwife visited and left notes in a neat hand. Walk in the morning, nap in the afternoon, keep the feet up when the day is long. Mason read the notes like they were a map. He followed them because maps save time and trouble. People in town noticed, as people do. Most offered smiles and small gifts. A neighbor sent fresh eggs. The storekeeper said, "I have ginger if it helps her belly." A few counted on their fingers and whispered to each other. Ayanna felt those looks but did not let them enter her. She walked with her head high, paid for flour and beans, and greeted the grocer with respect. When a sharp remark floated near, Mason answered with calm. He said, "We are happy and grateful." Often that was enough. The world is softer when someone chooses soft answers. The months moved like pages turning. Spring leaned into summer. The beans in the small garden climbed their poles and made little white flags. The calf learned to run and then to pause. The creek spoke again after a short rain. In the evenings, when the air cooled, Mason sanded pine boards for the cradle. He worked by the window so the last light would help his eyes. He shaved each slat until no splinter could hide. He carved a tiny bird on the headboard, not fancy, just a little sign of hope with open wings. Ayanna wove her blanket with quiet colors. She chose soft browns, a thread of dawn blue, and a line of warm gold like sunlight on the field. Sometimes she sang while she worked. The song did not have English words, but Mason could feel the meaning. It sounded like, "Welcome, little one, you are wanted here." They spoke to the baby in small ways. Mason tapped the cradle rail and said, "I will fix anything that wobbles." Ayanna placed a hand on her belly and said, "We will make this house gentle." Mason read out loud in the evenings. He did not have many books, but he had one with a story about a long walk through tall grass. He read slowly in a voice like a quiet stream. Ayanna closed her eyes and listened and rested. Letters travel slow in the wide country, but at last a letter came from Ayanna's aunt to the north. It said, "I am glad you are safe." It said, "Your home sounds kind." It said, "I bless your new child." The parcel with the letter held a string of bright beads and a small leather pouch for herbs. Ayanna pressed the beads to her heart and then hung them by the window where the light could find them. Some nights fear came to visit, as fear does. It came as a question with no answer. Will everything be all right? Mason took those nights outside under the stars. He breathed the cool air and watched the sky like a roof full of tiny lamps. He told himself, "I can be brave and gentle at the same time." He walked back inside when his breath was slow again. He did not tell fear to leave. He told fear it could not drive. When the heat grew strong, Ayanna rested more. She learned to sleep in the afternoon for 1 hour, like the midwife said. Mason learned to listen for the sound that meant she needed water. He set a bell by her chair and said, "Ring this if I am out by the fence." She smiled and said, "I will." He heard that small bell 3 times in 1 week. He came every time with a steady step. The day they chose a name, the sky was wide and clean. They sat by the table with 2 cups of tea and a small list of names. They wanted something that honored both their roads. They tried the names out loud. They smiled when one name felt like a good coat that fits the shoulders just right. They did not tell anyone. They held the name in their hands like a warm stone. As the 9th month drew near, the house became a little ship ready for a new voyage. The cradle stood by the wall with a quilt over it. The rocker waited with its wood smooth as river stones. Clean cloths were folded in a neat stack. Ayanna's bag for the berth sat near the door with soap, a comb, the bead string, and the leather pouch of herbs. She was ready in the way a person is ready for something they cannot control, prepared, calm, and open. The day began like any day. The sun climbed. The hens fussed. The wind brushed the grass. Then Ayanna felt a slow, deep wave move through her body. She breathed and set her hand on the table. Another wave came, and then another. She looked at Mason and nodded. He did not rush. He went to the door, saddled the mare for the midwife, and then sent a boy from a nearby farm to fetch her. He drew water to heat on the stove. He opened windows so the air would be fresh. He spoke in simple lines that made the room steady. "I am here," he said. "You are strong." The hours passed like a long walk. The midwife arrived with her calm bag and kinder eyes. She guided the room like a captain guides a boat, with small orders and a soft touch. Ayanna worked with courage, breath by breath. Mason held her hand when she wanted it and stepped back when the space needed to be wide. He was not a hero. He was a husband learning how to be steady. At last, a bright sound filled the room, small and new and perfect. The midwife smiled the smile she always saved for this kind of moment. She placed a warm, wet bundle on Ayanna's chest. The bundle moved and let out another small cry. The world changed by a hand's width. Mason felt tears gather quick and clean. He did not hide them. He touched one tiny hand with his big finger. The hand closed around him like a promise. "A daughter," the midwife said. Strong voice. "Good color." Ayanna said the name they had chosen. It fit the air. It felt like a door opening. Mason said the name after her, slower, tasting the sounds. He would never forget the way it felt to say it that first time. After the midwife cleaned and wrapped the baby, after the room grew quiet again, after the kettle went off and someone laughed because the kettle did not know this was not the time, the 3 of them rested. The house felt new and old at the same time. It felt like it had been waiting for this moment since the first board was nailed. The days that followed were soft and busy. They learned a new rhythm. Feedings came like tides. Naps came like gifts. The sun rose whether anyone slept or not. Mason burned the porridge twice and then learned the trick. Ayanna learned to swaddle with a firm hand that still looked gentle. The baby liked the rocker and the sound of rain on the roof. She stared at the carved bird on the cradle as if they were already friends. People stopped by with kindness. The neighbor who brought eggs now brought a little cap with a tiny knot on top. The grocer saved the best peaches. The clerk who had stamped their paper months ago sent a note that said, "Congratulations," and added 2 blue ribbons for the cradle rail. Even the ones who had once stared now softened when they saw the peace in the small house. Soft answers had done their work.